You will be changing, na? Okay. Okay, right. Yeah. So good morning again. I'm very sorry for the, some technical mishap. And there is some problem from my side. I do not know what is the nature of audience. Are most of them are students or faculty or Manjunath? Most of them are faculty and students. Hello. I'm not able to hear Manjunath. Okay. So accordingly, I will speak. No. So what depending upon the training program topic, I thought I will better title myself as emerging technologies, role of bioincubators, startups, and academia industry interfaces. Although I will be showing some PPTs for some time, we'll have more discussion later. When I was showing this, I'll also tell you some live experiences that to prove that all that is being announced by the governments, state or central governments, are accessible, or what are the different experiences people face in terms of really doing innovation. I was a former senior advisor looking after most of the programs of DBT, Department of Biotechnology. In 1980s, late 80s, we were about dozen people in the government. And we really wonder now, for 30 years of working ourselves restlessly, I was the youngest to retire. There is one more person still there. So we saw the entire growth. Most of these 12 people have done most of the jobs in terms of whatever you see biotechnology today. So we have seen really growth of this technology from nothing to now startups and incubators, all those products, modern genetic engineering, genome editing, and so on. So it also happened that due to my long-standing relations with a group in Pondicherry and Chennai, I happened to come here after my retirement to take over the job of vice president of the group. Then I saw that from person who was making policy at the highest level in terms of regulating biologicals, biotherapeutics, monoclonals, most of the guidelines, if you see, you will see my name at the background, that I am the one who was associated with all those regulatory documents in many of the reports in the government. But when I came down means exactly Pondicherry from Delhi. Since 1 year, what I am noticing is practicing what has been told at the policy level is not so easy. So I did one phase 3 Covaxin clinical trial in one of our group's hospital. And the whole experience started from there. Now we have about 12 clinical trials going on because of me. And I see there's a range of problems with respect to product development, innovation, clinical trials, even the quality of doctors, treatments. So a range of things. As our Vice Chancellor also pointed out, the research is actually actually at fault. Public health research, particularly from the medical institutions, except for some funding in All India Institute of Medical Science and other bases, it is mostly done by life science people who do not have a greater experience about human body. On the other hand, people who clinicians, they don't want to, even today, they don't want to interact. But with COVID, a lot of changes have taken place. So I will be giving a 360-degree experience of myself during my talk. So next one. So this is one of the famous PPTs which I used to borrow always from the collections of APJ Abdul Kalam. So if you see here, we have gone through from 10,000 BC to 2020. It is not that technology innovation is now only being talked now. There was no terminology like that. But at that time also, you see, for example, natural metals and then natural ceramics were there as early as 5000 BC. Metallurgy, small molecules were known by chemical age in 19th century. Large molecules came in. Advanced materials, composites, computers, chips came in. Then the whole range of genomics came in. Then nanotechnology came in. So it is an evolutionary process. Innovation has been always happening all through the ages. Just next slide, please. So this is the age in which we call it as a dark age. But in dark age also mostly the human beings were experiencing what is available in the nature, whether the biodiversity which our Vice Chancellor spoke, or whether the material diversity which was surrounding us, and then cultivating in the wild, all those things started. Even the biodiversity appreciation as well as deforestation started in the dark age also for cultivation purposes. As we moved, next slide please. So as we moved in the red box, we came into industrial revolution. During that time, a lot of these small pharma molecules, vaccines, biologicals, Pasteur, it started with all Louis Pasteur, and then it went on. What is more important is in between this period, one of the greatest innovation in my view, one of the greatest innovation by a very uneducated, illiterate person, that is, you might have already heard. What I always get excited is the Leeuwenhoek. He happened to observe under the lenses by grinding some of the microorganisms. He didn't know that they are microorganisms. So Leeuwenhoek opened the entire world of microbiology. Today, whatever we talk, 50% of it is microbiology, 50% of it is molecular biology in case of genomics and biotechnology. So it was actually discovered at the age of Robert Koch and also Leeuwenhoek with those crude equipment, microscope they call. But the wonderful important thing between dark age and the transition age is that the microscopes up to 1900, 1920, when you see them, you see them all the colors in the microscope. They are not achromatic, they are chromatic lenses. Then to get the achromatic lenses, it took 300 years. Somewhere in the 1930s, the achromatic lenses take. Sometimes to get a new material, innovation, new technology, it can take ages and ages. That is also being learned in the. So history of science and technology is very important. We talk with the present technology, but there should be, all students should be taught about history of science and technology. Then you will come to know that it is not that what we are talking has not been talked earlier. Then next one please. So we moved into biological revolution. There came, Mendel came in the early days with his experiment. Then from there the concepts of genes came. There's a long journey towards now realizing that we can edit the genes the way we want. Next one. So why I'm showing the previous slide was the particularly last 100 years, whatever revolution has taken place, the speed with which the technology has changed has never been there in the previous hundreds of years, 220,000 years. The progress in technology is so fast in the last 100 years as we enter into the next 100 plus years in the 21st century. So to catch up with the technology, it is humanly impossible. If somebody says I'm expert in so many things and then talking very generalized things, it does not mean anything. You have become very specialist, yet you should be aware of other interdisciplinary sciences. So today, as somebody was talking, I think Manjunath was telling, the interdisciplinarity, collaboration and partnership is must. Working in isolation, you will get nothing. So then, as we moved up, next one. So we now see all around us, some 6-7 technologies we see. We talk about advanced materials. You just see the range of materials available. For example, Asian paints, you see the number of types of materials available, that it is dirt resistant, rust resistant, water resistant, glaze resistant, dust resistant. All those materials have come. Same thing with the aircraft, same thing with the satellites. These materials have come in, which are up to 1 micrometer. And the nanotechnology also added up to this venture. Then came the autonomous transport systems is another one which is going to revolutionize. In fact, you don't need maybe driving schools at one point of time. Then you have artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is a mind-boggling thing, particularly an extension of information and communication technologies. I'll tell you some examples. I'll share you where I am practically doing this project with one of the companies. Then you have a 3D printing. 3D printing in future, we are going to use biology, 3D printing and materials, all three combined together along with genomics and Internet of Things and robotics. All put together, you may have a kidney supplied to you as required by your body and compatibility. So 3D printing is going to facilitate. Already a kidney has been printed in Israel, and of course it should be made functional. There are a lot of things going on. Internet of Things. Internet of Things has enormous, very small applications to small innovations to highest level of innovation. Robotics, you don't have to, now already we are adapting in the absence of, say during COVID, even some restaurants had robots to serve food actually. So that is the level of revolution going on with all these 6-7 technologies. Next one, please. So in case of discovery to high level innovation, in the last 3 decades particularly, genomics and genome editing, RNA biology, proteomics, metabolomics, these 4 sets of omics have made a lot of difference in understanding biology, understanding the behavior, physiology, biochemistry and molecular synthesis about organisms. Computation biology helped us to quantify the biology in terms of algorithms, that is a marriage between biology and computational sciences. It's now one of the highly paid subjects in terms of futuristic thinking about using AI, biology and computational thinking. Biorefinery is another one where you use all those microbes to produce those chemicals which are now produced through chemical route. As our Vice Chancellor of Shobit University said, eco-friendly refineries where they will leave nothing like effluent or anything like that. System and synthetic biology are two important things, particularly synthetic biology. Now the biology has become synthetic. It has become highly beneficial. For example, Mukesh Ambani, and we had a small gathering about investments in Reliance. They are investing something like 600 crores for synthetic biology based on algal systems. And how it is useful, I'll come to that. Stem cell biology, you might have heard, it is still a subject of potential and also a lot of controversy. Then novel animal models. You are going to test anything possible. Now we are possible with all these technologies, genetic engineering, genome editing. You can produce models of animals which are deficient in diseases. For example, in COVID, there is a AC3 receptor. You might see it in the television. There is one small notch-like thing coming out. And now, in Rosalind Institute, they are developing a rat, mouse particularly, with a AC3 deficient, receptor recognition deficient mutant. So you can test most of these novel molecules against COVID by using these animal models, whether they are effective or not. Nanosciences, it is something like somebody was telling, is it nanoscience or nanoscience? Nanoscience has entered into nanosciences. Everywhere nanoscience applications have come into force, including advanced materials. IoT, artificial intelligence, you are all aware how revolutionary they are. Next one, please. I will touch each of them. Not all of them is possible. Some important things. First, I'll tell about emerging sciences, emerging technologies. What are they up to? And then click to in what do we do with the innovation? And then incubators, and then startups a little bit, and what should we do? And some examples. I'll first of all tell you about genomics and genome editing. For those who are familiar, just forget about it. For those who are not familiar, please have a small view about what I'm going to tell you to just make up your mind. What is the potential of these technologies? Next one, please. So, the smallest organism, before the whole story of genome, people say that, maybe telling many companies in Bangalore, if you really see the history, it all started with Gregor Mendel talking about genes, then chromosomes, then came several technologies like plasmid, then DNA was discovered. So there's a long history. This slide will tell you the whole history from 1865 to 2003, when in the process, many organisms like E. coli, mouse, C. elegans, and many genomes were also sequenced. Actually, the technology and the human genome sequencing costed something like $3 billion. That means to sequence one human genome, it costed $3 billion by 2003. In 2003 or 2002, Clinton and Tony Blair announced the world that we have sequenced the genome. But actually, it was a draft genome, and even now, much part of the human genome is being understood and interpreted. I will not go into every aspect of this timeline, just to say that between 1865 to 2003, you can see again those 100 years, the whole revolution in one particular area, that is genome, has come so fast that every 1 or 2 years, 5 years, 3 years, the technology has been growing step by step, step by step. If you really read this slide in between, you will appreciate my point that you cannot really catch up. See, for example, mouse genome. Once you know the mouse genome, you know the mouse genes. Once you know the mouse genes, you know what to do with those genes, how to manipulate those genes. So genetic engineering was going on the parallel side, and a lot of deficient models, different types of breeding materials like nude mice, they were all coming. So each of these steps has resulted into multiple of applications, and then there is a horizontal and vertical expansion of each of these discoveries across various innovations. So you can appreciate only when I leave this to your office, and you can just have a look where you want. You can collect from Dr. Manjunath. Next one, please. Next one, Dr. Manjunath. Yeah. So, but in the process, after that, people have understood what equipment is needed. A lot of people use this slide. Of course, now it has gone beyond. So now today, so much of almost several thousands of microbes several thousands of organisms have been sequenced, and today the data goes into gigabytes, several gigabytes. In fact, most of the servers are now not able to keep these sequences. A lot of our people who are in research, the faculty, would deposit in NCBI or European Bioinformatics database. So those databases have overflooded in such a way. Now they are having like European Bioinformatics storehouse. It has now got a cloud after cloud getting the data, and huge data is being accumulated. Unfortunately, with all my bickerings in the government, we could not have our own storage facility. We still deposit years of work and the funds received from the national government in international depository of sequences. And we also claim that in our biodata. This is a tragedy sometimes when you don't plan properly. So anyway, the point I was to tell is that growth of DNA sequencing has come so much. Recently, when one has to sequence a neonatal child, a human child sequence, I was seeing the quotations. One quotation was 1 lakh rupees per child, full genome sequence. The other quotation was 30,000 from Bangalore. So it is 30,000 to 1 lakh, it has become so cheap to sequence, whereas it costed $3 billion a decade ago. So that is the level of capacity, that instrumentation capacity, technology, all this has happened because, not because just by some equipment. It involved interdisciplinarity, multiple disciplines coming together in making a machine. So next one, please. Next one. Yeah. So now you see the number of machines. In India, you have about more than 30 facilities and about 45 machines as of now. So there are about more than 10,000 machines working all over the world in terms of sequencing. It could be, as of now in 2021, because of the COVID sequencing and others, the figure has gone to 35,000 machines are working at every given time. So the sequencing has become a 24/7 activity now. Next one, please. Then, parallelly to this development of sequences available, the people in the Broad Institute and many other people, they had a question that some bacteria, particularly the bacteria which is found in the curd, can tolerate the virus. On the right side, you can see the virus infection. And they were very surprised how the bacteria is overcoming virus infection. They found that the bacteria produces certain enzymes, nucleozymes, which will actually degrade the virus and which will also stain the sequencing positions, sometimes deletions, sometimes mostly deletions in these viruses, making them ineffective to infect. So they developed a self-defense mechanism. When it was fully understood, they found that it is nothing but CRISPR-Cas enzyme, CRISPR with a Cas protein, which actually attaches at a specific positions and then does whatever the job is assigned to it. Next one, please. There came the word genome editing. So this is the CRISPR-Cas technology. You might have heard everywhere about this one. Now the technology has grown so much that there are least negative effects, off targets, and all these things have been taken care now. And this is CRISPR-Cas. There are many other systems in bacteria, but CRISPR-Cas seems to be a very simple. It's basically an enzyme system, and nothing great than restriction enzymes we used to have. But it is an enzyme which will help us to specifically edit particular thing. For example, in restriction enzyme, you have a specific sequence to cut. But in this case, you can guide them. Okay, this particular area I want to edit, this particular area I don't want to delete, or this particular area I want to add or repair. So all these things is possible. That means you can manipulate the genome, which we have sequenced in the previous slides, at the will we want. So genomics information is essential for genome editing. Now, next one. So what is actually is that if you take a gene, you have got a promoter, an enhancer, gene and terminator. So basically it is a, suppose you call promoter as a verb, enhancer as an adjective, a noun and punctuation. Many times people, when they write in English, there could be some defects in the language. So that can be corrected by your computer. Same way you can correct or substitute or insert letters in the DNA from the original sequence to mutate the sequence. This is how it works. Next one. So it helps in correction of genes carrying harmful mutation, production of therapeutic proteins, elimination of viral sequences, and in agriculture also it helps in modifying the animal plants for disease resistance, and in also research tools understanding the mechanism of different processes. Next one, please. For example, sickle cell anemia, muscular dystrophy, choroideremia. This one, for example, human genome has 3 billion letters, 20,000 genes, and 3,000 genes have problems, which will result into all these diseases. In sickle cell anemia, only one amino acid, if you change, the sickle cell anemia goes off. So all these projects are going on globally. A lot of products are already available. Next one, please. For example, same thing in case of maize. Maize has got 2.5 billion letters of DNA. So the variation compared to human beings is 38.8% compared to the variation in human beings, which is only 1.5%. So here also we can play left and right with maize through genome editing to produce the way you want. Next one, please. So let us switch on to another technology called stem cell biology. So parallel to these technologies, like tissue culture in plants, the tissue culture of humans on animals also was evolving, which is otherwise called stem cell, because there are particular cells. If you know plant tissue culture, the meristematic cells. Similarly, the stem cells are nothing but actively growing cells which can divide and then become full organisms. There are some of the stem cells can become full organisms, some of them. It is so with the type of plants also. In plant also there are embryonic cells, growing cells. You have cells which are somatic cells. It's the same story with stem cell biology. There is nothing great if you know plant tissue culture. If you read stem cell biology once, you will easily understand. Next one, please. So somatic cells can be also manipulated for the defects that they have, and also embryonic stem cells can also be manipulated. In many cultures, disturbing the embryo, introducing genes and manipulating embryo is at the moment banned. And as far as a lot of experiments, about 700 clinical trials are going on somatic cell therapy for different genetic disorders. Next one, please. So the stem cells also continue to flourish in treating diseases. So there is a huge market of 3.7 billions, which is growing very fast. Even in India, there are some centers which claim to be treating with the stem cells, although there are regulations that they cannot be permissible outside the purview of clinical trials. So, but there are many illegally going on centers. I think this slide I am showing you because all these centers which are there globally, some of them have been established by regulatory authorities, their approvals, and many of them are not. So at least in India, 60 to 70% of the stem cell experiments are going on the patients are illegal. So the technology is not so ripe yet that unless you do the clinical trial and prove yourself that it works, stem cell alone will not be able to address the disease curation. Next one, please. Now, for example, when I was presenting some paper in the second human genome editing organized by Baltimore in Hong Kong, before the disturbance there in 2018, 17 or 18, I think, 18, there is a gentleman from China who happened to manipulate the embryos to make them, whether one of the parents was HIV patient, another one was HIV tolerant. So based on the study of their genes, he tries to manipulate the embryo and produce HIV-free children. During the conference, he made a presentation. It is a very interesting fact to see that there were about 400 delegates, 200 cameramen all over the world, and then 100 police people around us. With such number of people, he made a presentation very confidently. But unfortunately, because of lack of ethical clearances, etc., the Chinese government, I don't know where he is now. But it is true that globally, a lot of these experiments are on the way, whether it is considered ethically correct or not. So as we go towards the next century, next decades, it is not surprising that certain selective embryonic stem cell therapies would also be coming to light for regular applications. Next one, please. Next one. So then I came 3D bioprinting. Now currently it is used to print tissues and organs for screening drugs and chemicals. I mean, basically, in future, 3D printing is also going to be, the cost of these printers. Most of these printers will come to you by 5 lakh rupees to maximum 6 lakh rupees. We have one in our center here. We are doing some 3D printing of certain things. So you can use this. So combined with stem cells, genomics, and then genome editing, you can happily develop the different organs at the moment. This is a heart 3D print in Israel, which happens to be more or less mimicking the pig heart. It's a pig heart. So they are testing now. Probably we are not far away to have 3D printed organs which are compatible to our human body. Next one, please. Next one. Then we'll go to synthetic computation biology. Yes, next one. And synthetic biology. So now you have a genome sequence, you have an editing ability, and you have stem cells to manipulate, and you have 3D printer. Now you can do whatever, you can synthesize whatever you want in terms of chromosomes, in terms of DNA sequencing, and make them live in the organisms. Because you remember, virus outside the host is actually inactive. It is nothing but a particle. Once it goes to the host, it becomes active and infective. Similarly, the DNA can be made live by putting certain of the functional elements. So the original yeast chromosome in the number 3 figure and part synthetic yeast chromosome. So part of the original chromosome is taken, and then the synthetic one, the chunks of recombinant into original yeast chromosome until it is completely synthetic. So this is possible by application of computation biology, genomics, and finally 3D printing. Next one. So using this, a lot of genomes have been sequenced, up to 10 to the power of 7. Genes have been synthesized, and small oligos have been synthesized long ago. Next one, please. So already synthetic biology has registered $4 billion market now. It is growing at 23%. Bangalore, there was a talk by one of the experts. So synthetic biology used for synthetic DNA, synthetic genes, synthetic cells, then bioinformatic applications, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, so many areas the synthetic genes are being applied. Synthetic biology is applied. Next one, please. Now, if you see, what is the worry is that already in 2006, before 2015, eukaryote chromosomes, bacterial genomes, viral genomes, and then DNA reading, everything has to happen before that using synthetic biology. So there are many implications of good and bad of synthesizing these viruses and genomes. Now you have been talking about COVID, whether COVID is a synthetic one or a man-made one or is a natural one. So why this talk comes? Because technology now enables you to make new forms by synthetic biology. Next one, please. This is the platform where you require, you have to design. So you have to have a bio-based materials, high value commodity chemicals, all those things it will be applicable. Next one, please. So, sorry. So finally, synthetic biology integrates as an interdisciplinary one every damn technology, biology, engineering, system biology, bioinformatics, or computation biology, chemistry and mathematics. So it is a place where all disciplines merge. So it also gives an impression that all sciences meet after all somewhere. We don't have to fight that I am a chemist or I am a biologist. Today that won't work. You have to be interdisciplinarity. Next one, please. Now, Canadian researchers in 2017 reconstituted a poxvirus, smallpox virus. You know smallpox, how dangerous it is. Bringing back an extinct virus that is related to smallpox is a pretty inflammatory situation. So it is a very dangerous situation. So the genie is out of a lamp. the synthetic biology is out of tubes. Then it is very dangerous of laboratory escape in next in $10,000, $100,000 it has been synthesized. Similarly, next one please. Similarly, there are people are developing a xenobot, living cells, which is a xenotransplant robot. Scientists, University of Vermont, Tufts University. These bots are based on synthetic biology project. They can research that they clean human arteries, clean microplastics from oceans, and find radioactive. These bots, when they go into the artery, they clean the human arteries. So there are experiments going on in the mouse very successfully. Next one, please. So at the same time, synthetic biology can also be used to recreate known pathogenic viruses, which I showed you, smallpox, then making existing bacteria more dangerous. So modifying human genome using human gene drives, because you can see the robot, what it is doing. Today it's artery cleaning, tomorrow it could be some other things. Modifying human immune system. So all these dangers are there. Therefore, long ago, the countries have come together under United Nations to have a convention on bioweapon development. So a lot of these things are deliberated how emerging technologies are going to be a concern for biosecurity. Next one, please. Now you can see that it is not, the pandemic is not there just with COVID-19. It was as early as for 1860, the Spanish flu, then you have H3N2, then you have HIV, you had H1N1, you have Nipah, you have SARS, Ebola, COVID-19, has come now, MERS and H17. So there are a lot of epidemics, small scale or big scale pandemic is actually going across 4 or 5 nations. Incidentally, COVID-19, because of its high transmittability, and then a lot of transport, the passenger movement, tourism, it has spread so fast. So the why I am showing this slide is, it is important that the countries have to now learn to use all these technologies, keep them ready, keep stockpiling of PPEs, ventilators. Some of our countries are still on the back foot. Singapore, for example, CDC Atlanta, they have got $400 million worth the stocks which are going to be injectables, PPEs or whatever, ventilators, oxygen concentrators, so lots of them. At the same time, these pandemics have resulted into given a message that you have to do large innovations. Many startup companies have in India have been successful in developing several innovations. Of course, they have to come into light for the commerce. Next one, please. What I did was with my global friends from Johns Hopkins and Penn State, we started the Alliance for Pandemic Preparedness and Response. You can see the website at aparweb.org. This one is bringing all the developing countries together, and also technology and also knowledge sharing platform is being created under this APAR initiative, which is basically South-South and North-South collaborative platform, for which I am also one of the founders. Next one, please. Now the nanosciences. Yeah, next one. You know, everybody knows what is nano. Nano is a 10 minus 10 molecule. At that level, you know what all it can do. Next one, please. So it has gone to market now, although the historically it started in 1970. It is not now because they are in the market. We are all talking about nanotechnology. Next one, please. So it has various applications. Again, it is a very interdisciplinary science. It has got application in lithography, pharma, materials, and then fabric industry, optics industry, superconductors, design of computers, chips, everywhere. So there is a broad range of applications. We in India are yet to explore many of these applications. Although there is a nanotechnology mission by DST, they are all concentrated in some elite institutions. We have many things to do. I think Oxford University or such universities should slowly start application-oriented nanoscience technology. So therefore, there will be a lot of innovations around across disciplines, including agriculture. Next one, please.
रजिस्ट्रेशन मतलब अच्छा प्रोग्राम में ओके ओके फ्री है तो फ्री में तो क्या लगता है बच्चे करा दे.
So this is how the even IT technology has grown in from. Now you have got IoT, artificial intelligence. So it's a timeline. So all these technologies, I would like to show timelines because they are not today that we are talking. They took long time for step-by-step evolution. And by reading this, the innovation will be enhanced. Your way of thinking will be completely brighter. Sometimes you can find that what you are thinking was already done in 1888. So please go through that type of investigation into these particular technologies so that your way of approach towards innovation will be much more clear. Next one, please. So now it is about $5.2 trillion. Next one. But a lot of people say compare information communication technology with the biotechnology. Next slide, please. So there are complications. Biotechnology needs a lot of patience, and then investment may be low and market size is also low. Whereas no, information technology. Biotechnology, sometimes investment is very high. It may take 3 to 10 years to get the product, and only small and medium people. So bio innovation, either in agriculture or public health, bio innovation is more appropriate, along with information technology wherever it can be more blended. So I think each technology has got their own plus and minuses. So you should not compare straightforward. A biotechnology is better than information technology. Nothing like that today. They have to be combined together, take an optimal advantage for innovations in public health and agriculture. Next one, please. Because ultimately all these sciences are converging. Next one, please. Now bioincubators. So we know now the all nuances of emerging technologies, how they are linked with one another. It is not that we can work in isolation. Now let us go to the innovation part. Next one, please. I always think innovation is, a lot of people say many things, but first of all, to have an innovation, you should have adequate information. What I tried to give you so far is information. So much information I gave you. Then you should develop an idea. Once you get an idea, you have to incubate it. Some place where facilities, instruments, people, mentors are there. To do that, you need some money also. That is investment. And to do investment, you cannot do as independent. You should have a small company-like structure, which is a startup. That is the instrument. Then you should have, the last factor is that you should have the required, what you call, then you have to have a lot of, interdisciplinarity in terms of developing these ideas. That's how innovation proceeds in. It is not just automatically you get an idea and you get a product. Next one, please. So this is what I'm showing, that you have steps. You got an information on one side, and you got the incubation place, and you have got to team, prototyping and interdisciplinarity, and you are incubating in a facility. In university here, we have a MGM bioincubator, where there are about 9 companies working on AI and IoT related to public health. Next one, please. Next one. So, but there are types of innovation. Not that every time you will have a breakthrough. And in most of the US and many Israel, you have a lot of breakthrough compared to India. It could be frugal innovation. We are very good in incremental innovation, adding small additions to compare to US and Israel. We are good at this frugal innovation. Focused on substantial cost reduction also will take place. So this is where India has an edge over. Then sustainable innovation. Sustainable in terms of environment, and then in terms of affordability, and also in the terms of social needs and national security. So in that point of view, Israel tops in terms of sustainable innovation, and then followed by US and us. So we are there in all these 3 types of innovation. But our till we have to graduate from frugal innovation to sustainable innovation and breakthrough innovation, and that will take long time. So everybody says I am innovator, but are you doing what innovation is very important. Next one, please. If you have a breakthrough innovation, you will have a lot of benefits. So there are incubators created by BIRAC. I think I'm happy to know that Oxford University department has got some funds from BIRAC. So these are different bioincubators. They have their own sets of rules, bureaucracy, access, and so on and so forth. I think in Bangalore there are many. So those people who are having a startup should have. Oxford University should also, it's high time, they should start an incubator, not just bioincubator, but an incubator for all practical purposes, bio or agriculture or anything like that. I don't know whether you have it already. So next one, please. So these are different incubators. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them they claim, but they don't deliver. So you have to be very careful in choosing these incubators. As a startup, your investment is very low. So you can't waste money on the name of rent and sophisticated facilities and some English jargons. So you should be very careful in choosing the innovation center. Next one, please. Then it is also important to arrange the investment. I told you the investment information you have got an idea, you have thought of incubator. Now you have to treat investment for making a startup. So there are many different types of things. Simplest thing is family. Some family and friends. Okay, I will give you 50 lakh rupees. You give me without any interest. Sometimes some friends, they will say, okay, you give interest or make me also a shareholder if the idea is very good. So there are some banks which will also give, there is short-term startup funds are there. But all these funds are available by the government. The process is too long. For me, if I get an idea, for example, you take BIRAC, although I belong to the system, I have no problem in telling. For example, you have an industry development area, idea, innovation, and you give it to BIRAC. And who are sitting in BIRAC and JEDSIC? All of them are basically the academic experts. They have never developed a product. And it's always it is a question to me, even as a policymaker, this is not a correct practice. So there should be some agreement with the industry R&D groups to have a confidentiality maintained and evaluate these proposals. Or there should be an internal evaluation. So evaluation by academicians quite often will be more academic than industrial. So these sources of funding should be carefully assessed. Don't waste your time because technology does not wait for you. Next one, please. So these are different funds available on different names. You have got even incubation being supported by the BIRAC and the Department of Biotechnology. Next one, please. So according to Startup India, it is 25 crore. The moment you are crossing 25 crores, you are not called as a startup company. So below 25 crores, you can be startup. And another important thing is most of the startups are in marketing, accounting, and also distribution of goods and services. There are very few successful technology incubators, but nowadays, slowly because of I should not say thanks to COVID or whatever, so people are now realizing technology incubation is more important. Technology startups are more important for giving out more products. And then secondly, what is the definition by the Startup India? But you don't have to worry about it. Nobody is going to have a startup up to 25 crores. Most of the startups, 90% of them are closed by 3 years. Only 10% survive. There are hundreds of reasons. You should study what are the reasons. There are many articles. So you should be able to gear up to the challenges to survive beyond 3 years. Most important thing in this is investment. Investment, if you cleverly use it, it's fine. If you think that you use just for rent and other things, for salaries, a startup company owner should himself work, not to employ first people. So that is one message I have seen. If you have a startup, you can't force it as an MD. Rather, you should work on the ground to save that money. Next one, please. So globally, it is about $91.4 billion. Are going to be 140 or so. Next one, please. The market size of startups is very good. So if you see this one, in India, the health sciences, life sciences, IT services, first two columns. So there are quite a bit of them. Agriculture is in the middle, and then green technology is on the end. So a lot of companies are now coming up in the agriculture startups after the new schemes have been announced by the state governments. Next one, please. So if you see startup agricultures, in this one, Karnataka is leading most. And you are in Bangalore, 67% of the startup initiations are from the Karnataka, the NCR region, Delhi, Maharashtra, Telangana and others. So other states have yet to pick up. So you have a lot to learn from Karnataka startup, agri-biotech startups, what type of innovation they are doing. I would love to Oxford University to arrange some of these startups as a panel discussion. So I'll be allowed to promote, to even moderate this type of panel. At a later time, you can call some 10 startups in agriculture as a sequel to this, and we can really enjoy a panel discussion to understand what are the challenges in startups in agri-biotech. Next one, please. So agriculture is the focus here. There are 950 emerging startups have been analyzed, and about globally 10.1 billion euro funding has gone into ag biotech. So most of these applications which are being targeted is vertical farmings, robotics and automation, precise farming, smart farming, Internet of Things, drones, big data and AI. Now all these applications are feasible when you have a large acreage. In India, the most of the Prime Minister also said that we have only less than, in North it is called Biga. In many places it is less than 1 acre. So we have to address these technologies to a smallest unit possible. That is a challenge for us in India. Next one, please. Next one. So these are also agribusiness incubators in various places. You can incubate your startups. Next one, please. So one of the things is our people, one of the startups, I like it because I saw it. It is a vertical farming. Startup is promoting vertical farming, if not in vertical biodiversity, is farming vertical skyscraper farming, it's called. So it's a very interesting type of harvesting technology is also there. Next one, please. So earlier what is to happen? You push somebody in the pond and take up an employment before he reaches. But it is not like this. If you are fast, and you will pick up rather than a slow fish. So you have to be fast in this business and see that you don't are held up because of the bureaucratic procedures. Because your idea is more precious. Your innovation has to go into the market at a time when it is needed. If it is discovered, innovation is complete. After it is needed, then it is waste. Next one, please. Of course, the growth of startups in India, not a very important, I had already told you. Next one, please. So there is a Startup India hub. A lot of good information is available if you really want to learn the methods, applications, investments, opportunities. Even the mentors are there. So where the incubators are there, what are there, what are the government bodies. So it's a very nice knowledge portal one can use. Next one, please. It is also important now. Social entrepreneurship is also another one. That how do you link consumer needs with your innovation and also get back to the consumers to improve it again. This is called cyclic innovation, where you involve multi-stakeholders and then you really are into the ground to do starting from facilitation to advancement. So you go on interacting with the consumers to improve your product line, to diversify your product line. This is another important thing coming up in many countries like Switzerland and others, where they call it as participatory innovation. Next one, please. And that type of innovation is very optimally suited. For example, in case of AI, one example I'll give you. This is a company in Chennai which has got to help with cancer. Many times you go to the cancer oncologist after it has been detected malignant. They will say metastasis is there. Then they will say radiotherapy or chemotherapy. How these decisions are taken, how the modern technology is evolving, what new treatments are coming. So these people, companies developing through an artificial intelligence, and then genomics, a platform to see how a decision can be made. Next one, please. So you can see a lot of data is accumulated in the patient data profile. For example, in the hospitals where I am working, in that group, you have 5 years of data with about 300 data points per patient. So that means there are about, it's a very huge data. And in that, 7,000 malignant cancer data are there. I mean, which includes all types of data about that particular cancer patient. Using that data, analyzing through artificial intelligence and annotation, a oncological decision-making system is being developed by this company. The same way, if you have variables in agriculture situation, collecting all these variables over a period of 10 years, computing them, using them AI, combined with IoT for a tool development, you can actually help the farmer with a one computer and a tool to see how this next year, what forecast, what type of market data. He can himself work at the level. There are already systems in US and particularly in Australia. People are developing these localized predictive systems based on AI and then IoT as well as the data that you have to collect. Because the data is very important for at least 10 years of data of that form is very important. It can be done in India by questionnaires, by asking in the villages, and then meteorological data, secondary data. So it's a very huge exercise in India because we don't believe in maintaining records, and data is very scantily available. So we should try to somehow develop these models in the agri innovation. Next one, please. Then lastly, it is not just important that you go alone. You have to also collaborate with your professors, mentors, and then people who are into different subject areas. At least go and consult them. Sir, I'm thinking like this, is okay or not? Whether you take their idea or not. Starting from that exercise, you can use the labs, you can use the instruments on payment basis in many research institutions. Next one, please. So 65% of the labor force now, according to work, the labor force will work in new jobs. This is what the technological revolution says. Next one I'll show you. Next one. So you can see biomedical engineers will be highest demand, 62%. Then medical people, systems people, computer people, and mathematics people. So these are the main people who are based on AI, IoT, systems in public health and agriculture. The job is around these type of people. Whatever education you have, you do biotechnology or no biotechnology, or you do medicine MBBS, and if you have this innovation around these areas, the job opportunities are going to be more and more. Particularly with the COVID, the attention towards biomedical engineers, medical graduates, and computation biology in public health systems, and also the automated agriculture is going tremendously in many countries. Next one. And then, therefore, universities and education systems should not be restricted to, "Arey, tum aisa baithna nahi chahiye. You should not sit like that. You should not wear this." There should be a very open type of learning. Anywhere children can start working on a particular project, just simply on a canteen table or outside in the lawns. So it should be very problem-based learning. It is not the classrooms that is important. That openness has to be there. The School of Biomedical Sciences, which we are opening, will be working on these functions. So they should always going on thinking voluntarily rather than directed education teaching. Next one, please. So there are no two. DNA has one of the major sequencing place in USA. They have a garden made of these 2 strands of DNA. But the message of the director who was involved in the human genome sequencing is that there are no 2 ways of doing. There is only one way. The one way is take either this way or that way. Either you want to go with the technology or you don't want to go with the technology. So somewhere, whether you go or not, you will be merged. You will merge yourself with the technology in the pathway of life. So therefore, be with the technology. Thank you very much.
Dear participants, if you have any queries or questions to sir, you can mute yourself and talk to sir.
Yes. Questions, please.
Or you can post it in the chat box.
Team.
Sir, good morning. Dr. Manjunath here.
Yeah.
Sir, when it comes to multidisciplinary domains for research, generally funding agency will not through it because either one of the branch, the senior will be there in one of the branch, and the allied departments, their research experience may not be that notable. Under such condition, most of the times we will lose the proposals. How to cope up with this?
Actually, the funding agencies, if you remove the DING, hello, if you remove the DING, the fund, hello,
Yes, sir.
if you remove the DING in the funding agency, funding word, funding agency are very funny. Actually, they say we will encourage interdisciplinarity, but many a times an engineering person would have not published much. So the biodata may be just, is a qualification and may not be beyond that. So I think it is my point is that, see, you have to not depend on just funding agency alone. Somehow you have to come together to develop a preliminary understanding of what is your research plan is. Because many times what happens, a lot of these projects are made without great depth of consultations among the participants. Then you have to also borrow certain biodata related people. Some people have good biodatas, but they may not participate actively. So my suggestion is you have to fill with the blood and pus both to satisfy the funding agency. You just can't be interdisciplinarity on the name of interdisciplinarity without a good biodata of the participants will always fail. So you should, for the sake of good biodata, you should have some people who are active, who are passive. So make it a more network type of proposal. I think then you can try. But you are always have to try, because you never know what the fellow thinking there. Some old, outdated expert may be sitting there. He will say, this will not work. So all these factors are there. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
We have a question in the chat box. Why youngsters fail in getting any grants?
Actually, if you want me to tell the truth, the lot of people, after I came to this place, a lot of university scientists and university people, they flocked around me. I said, oh my God, he's coming from the Delhi. So let him take his advice. And believe me, there are about 60 proposals which were sent to various agencies. And we got one. With all my expertise, with all the suggestions I made, because I was chair for 10 years to screen proposals, and almost some 100,000 proposals I would have screened in these 10 years. But yet, when I guided people, so the other side did not like it. The point is that either the expert committees are not evolved, either the funding agency has not made up its mind to actually support widely rather than very focused way in some elite institutions. So there are many factors. So there is no way actually. Young Scientist Awards in case of DST are relatively easy to come with. So I think it's a hit and trial, you know. I can't say any answer now. You have to try, that's all. Somebody also was telling that, do you know anybody in the funding agency? Probably that is also true. Sometimes it also works. And I tell you the truth, where Krishna is there, what is that university? Kuvempu. The Kuvempu University, and then Tanjavur Shastra University, and Geetam University, and then what else? ML University in Vijayawada. Some of these people, they have liaison officers in Delhi. So these people, they go to each funding department and they monitor what is happening to those projects directly with those officers. And they will wait. Maybe it is only one proposal per day, but they will somehow systematically take appointment and say, sir, namaskara sir, ನಾನು ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದೆ. So ನಮ್ಮವ್ರ ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದಾರೆ ನೋಡ್ರಿ ಸರ್. ಸೊ ನಮ್ಮ ಡಿಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಬರ್ರಿ, ನೀವು ಲಕ್ನೋಗೆ ಬರ್ರಿ, ನೀವು ವಿಜಯವಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಬರ್ರಿ, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡ್ಕೋತೀವಿ. So all sorts of things they do. So in case of Kuvempu University, in fact the Vice Chancellor himself used to trip Delhi every 2 months and then go to these funding agencies to understand their current thinking as well as to guide the different people for applications, and also make friendship with these people, call them, understand. So these are some unwanted techniques are also there. So people do. I mean, everything works in this country, although it should not work. The genuine proposal should work, but unfortunately it is like that. The second important thing is, we all in the, now I am on the south side, I understand that Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, to an extent Maharashtra also, and we all are waiting for a funding agency to reply from Delhi. And unfortunately, politically also, none of our politicians have taken any strategy to put a branch of these funding agencies in south of India, either in Bangalore or Hyderabad, so that we can go directly to these places rather than all the way traveling to Delhi without knowing Hindi and all that. So that is at least the Karnataka fellow, some of them you can take a Telugu fellow to talk in Hyderabad. So this is decentralization is not happening in terms of funding. So that is one of the biggest things. So I am writing a blog many times to many, in fact myself being in the government, I wrote some grievances to the Prime Minister's box, and it is now on Man Ki Baat is going on. Please write these ideas into his box, that the technology funding is access to technology funding in south of India is obscure, and it is truth. Yeah, next one please.
So next we have a question. How much grant maximum can we ask for a project?
Actually, the world, this is a very traditional question. See, for example, you can only stretch till your mat permits. Even if you are 6 feet, so you have to make your mat also 6 feet. So therefore, it depends on your objectives. Normally, a simple R&D project with 2-3 partners could be, you can start with 50 lakhs. And then normally R&D are funded around 30 now. When we started, we used to fund only 8, 5, 6. Now the manpower has increased. Even if you put 2 JRFs, it comes to 12 lakh rupees for 3 years. Consumables, minimum 5 lakhs if you put, it will come to 15 lakh rupees. So taking that as an estimate, 50 lakh is a benchmark. Above it depends on what is the scope of your project, what type of objectives are there. You can be ambitious, anything above 50, but you should be able to justify based on the volume of your work and the nature of your work, the expensiveness of your consumables and number of manpower, all those things are important, equipment particularly. So many times proposals are written saying that I need pH meter, I need a pillow, I need a sofa. So you can't ask small things to the funding agency. People say that if he doesn't have a pH meter, what type of a lab he is. So you should be very careful, even the instruments which you ask. By asking such small things, the people who are evaluating will easily understand, oh, this is just an empty lab and making more noise. So everything you have to weigh. So what type of biodata you have? If you ask me out of 10 parameters for your success, most important thing is your biodata. How beautifully your biodata is. What is your partner's biodata is. Whether they have a relevant experience in the objectives or not. The second one is in terms of objectives. Objectives, please go through the annual reports and websites of the funding agencies. Go to that subject, go to that area, see what has been funded, what is been going on, what type of projects are ongoing, accordingly where we stand. See, that is also very important. Then you choose something which is novel, which is local, which is very specific to that particular subject area, and you have a justifiable biodata for that one. For example, suddenly I'll put a proposal on synthetic biology. So they will ask you, what is that you have synthesized? So I have not synthesized the oligols. So these are the issues, you should match the biodata with objectives with what is already ongoing. This is very important. The remaining ones are most important. How do you plan your research work? What type of equipment infrastructure you already have? These are some minor factors. The major ones are whether your objective are repetitive, duplicative. For example, some people write, I would like to survey medicinal plants of some forest, then extract some metabolites. This is all old style of, a lot of universities only do this. Nothing they get. And they go on extracting crude and then testing on the cell lines. So those type of science will not be encouraged. So, and then if possible, you should consult people who are successful in the getting the projects. May not be from your own institution, maybe in other institution, and go and tell them, sir, this is the project, what do you think? As a third party evaluation. Before you send, you have enough confidence to even fight back. But even then, there could be some objections. So the process you only learn by submission, by process, creating a process to yourself to see it is as tailor-made as to the needs of funding agency. Okay.
So we have another question. Is there any story of recovery of granted funds for any research which they couldn't do it during stipulated period?
Quite often, you see, any balance that is remaining as per audit will be recovered.
And there's another question, sir. Can we ask money for the publications or patents in grant proposal? Will that be considered?
The moment there is no proper contingency, what you do is you ask for contingencies and you should write that as a justification. This is required for this is purpose. You inbuild in the contingencies. Next one.
Another question, sir. Whether funding project is allotted based on community, is there any segregation there based on it?
Based on?
Community, sir.
There is no reservation in grants.
So we have another question. Please throw some light on seed money.
Special call in the case yesterday.
Seed money of? Seed money of?
Just seed money, sir. They've asked, is there any such thing?
No, actually seed money means most of the times there are two types of seed money. That is, if the funding agency gives seed money, that is, for example, you propose some project and there is one crucial step. Unless that step is successful, for example, you have 4 objectives in a project. Many times we also did it. Suppose, unless the first objective is successful, you cannot do other 3 objectives. Then what we do is we go to part fund. Small fund we are given, it's a seed money for doing that particular objective. So that is how in the context of seed money it is used. The other seed money is the so-called NAC. The so-called NAC has got a requirement whether the universities and institutions which are being accredited have an internal system of funding for projects, intramural funding. So that is also where the seed money is used. So it depends on, for example, a NAC A++. I don't believe in NAC or crack anyway. This is actually making our lives very miserable. Rather than doing some work, we are all busy in NAC. A lot of universities are only cracking the NAC. So the seed money in the context of this cracking the NAC is that it could be in NAC A++ places. I have seen figures spending about 5 crores, 2 crores in a period of 5 years. So it depends on the university and how much they can spare. Then you should have your own internal system. It is an internal funding. The management will say, I will give, say for example, 1 crore for the period of 1 year for small preliminary investigations. Based on that, you can apply for a bigger grants. Okay, I have developed a stem cell. The stem cell is working and now I want funds for this. So the preliminary work you can do using the seed money. So the seed money has different ways of interpretation.
So those were the
Yes.
questions, sir. So at the outset, thank you, sir, for your detailed talk on emerging technologies. On behalf of management, principal, HOD, staff and students, I take this privilege to extend my heartfelt appreciation to Dr. S.R. Rao for taking time out and giving us an insight into the startup and academia industry interface. I hope the participants have some message which they will take home and have gained a knowledge about the same. So thank you so much for being part of this session of STTP, which is sponsored by AICTE. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Manjunath. See you.